I think of networking as a numbers game where, you go to events, virtual or in person, and you literally just get cards, right? And then maybe follow up, maybe connect on LinkedIn. A connector is someone who builds a deep, meaningful relationship with someone else for the very purpose of building a deep, meaningful relationship, not with, I'm going to get something, because everyone you meet is a conduit to something, to someone, to something you did not know, to something you did not know about yourself.
That's Susan McPherson, serial connector and author of The Lost Art of Connecting. I'm your host, Patrick McGinnis, and this is FOMO Sapiens. When the world's spinning out of control, it can be impossible to know what to do and what to miss out on. That's called FOMO, which is short for fear of missing out. How do I know? Because I coined the term, and I'm the world's first FOMologist. And this is the show where I ask entrepreneurial thinkers, people I call FOMO sapiens, how they live and work with conviction no matter what life throws at them. FOMO. FOMO. Welcome back to FOMO Sapiens. It's so good to be here with you this week. And if you're like me, you are starting to see people in the real world. I mean, never thought it would happen, but here we are. And I got to tell you, it's hard and it's awkward. I have said some stuff that I'm like, what are you talking about, Patrick? Like the next morning, I'm sort of thinking through the day before and I'm sort of like, why did I say that thing to that person? It was just awkward. And so I just want to tell you, and if you've seen, there's been a couple of skits on SNL about this. There's people, it's like you're talking about your vaccine for 10 minutes, like, oh, I got Moderna, my arm hurt. That's not interesting. So what I want to do today is help all of us, including myself, figure out how to reestablish normal contact in the real world. And that's why I've got a very special guest here with me today. Her name is Susan McPherson, and she is a serial connector, seasoned communicator, and founder and CEO of McPherson Strategies, a communication consultancy focused on the intersection of brands and social impact with clients like Intel, the Tiffany Foundation, Global Citizen Year, and JCPenney. She is also the author of The Lost Art of Connecting, the Gather, Ask, Do method for building meaningful connections. And we're going to talk with her about, she's an expert connector, so she can help us think about how to deeply connect with people, make meaningful connections, and not just rack up the business cards or rack up the old Facebook followers or Instagram connections or whatever it is for you. She also is an expert in communicating, so she can help all of us think about how to manage our, for example, if you have a business and you want to have PR and tell a story, how can we think through doing that more effectively? Because I can tell you something I've learned the hard way, that if you don't have the right message, it is not going to resonate with anyone. Now, I want to move on to our small ask real quick. And the ask for today is save a friend. If you like this episode and you find value in it, which I think you will, share it with somebody you know who is just not doing very well getting back into the real world. Maybe they were a little awkward at the party. Maybe they were the one who said something weird. Send it to them and you will help them out. And it will be great because then they'll also discover the podcast and maybe they'll continue listening and become a FOMO sapiens just like you. And now onto the interview. So what I love about Susan is that she is a connector. I've known her, actually, I met her earlier this year through some other stuff. And she knows everybody and she immediately helped me out with a bunch of stuff. So it's just kind of who she is. And so just to get started, I wanted to get inside her head a little bit. So I asked her the following question. Susan, you are a serial connector. So what do you do differently than other people and why do you think you do that?
Well, I was raised by two serial connectors way back when, probably long before you were born, late 60s, early 70s. And the usual situation in the Spector household, which is my maiden name, was trying to find real estate on the breakfast table because both my parents were clipping rapidly and furiously the 5 local newspapers plus yesterday's New York Times. And they were clipping so that they could then put in envelopes with little typewritten missives saying, thinking of you, thought of you. And this went on for years. And honestly, my father, who passed in 2008, continued all the way using a manual typewriter till 2007. So it was inbred, I guess, if that's a word, in me as a child. And I just assumed everyone did it.
I remember when I first read the Malcolm Gladwell, when he wrote about connectors, I think in The Tipping Point, and he talks about somebody who had gone to a restaurant and they liked it. So they told 37 people. And I was like, well, doesn't everybody do that? And I just realized.
Well, it's a lot. I mean, I will say it's a lot easier today with our technology, but Malcolm Gladwell also wrote what is now a very infamous article, infamous, about a woman named Lois Weisberg, who was actually featured in my book, who was known as the connector of Chicago throughout her lifetime, where she literally connected people, not just in her own, whatever industry she was in, but all walks of life, and literally created tapestries of people.
So is this, I mean, so you were taught this at the breakfast table. I don't know where I got mine from, but do you think this is nurture or nature? And if you are an introvert, right? If you're like a shy person, can you still be a connector?
I absolutely think you can be a connector. You may not be a master networker. There is a difference. And I think of networking as a numbers game where, you go to events, virtual or in person, and you literally just get cards, right? And then maybe follow up, maybe connect on LinkedIn. A connector is someone who builds a deep, meaningful relationship with someone else for the very purpose of building a deep, meaningful relationship, not with, I'm going to get something, because everyone you meet is a conduit to something, to someone, to something you did not know, to something you did not know about yourself.
I remember when I first started, quote unquote, networking, and I would come back from some event and I'd have like, because people used to give out business cards. Remember those old days? Like, I think the pandemic killed the business card, by the way. Like, I don't want to touch your business card. I don't care if everybody's been vaccinated. But I remember I come back with a stack of business cards and I'd throw them on the table. And then I keep doing that. And then by the end of the month, you're kind of like, well, I should do something with these. And you're like, who are all these people? Right. And there is this culture of collecting connections rather than doing anything with them. And so the whole point of this book is to say something completely different, which is, it's not about the numbers. It's about doing something real. So take us into the kinds of things that you recommend to people who actually want to make real connections.
Sure. Well, the number one theme that actually is woven through the entire book is leading with, how can I be of help? Rather than what you just addressed was when we used to go to that. When I say we used to, I mean, this is something that will go on, but that notion of what can I get? What can I walk away from with? And I sincerely recommend that you pivot and instead lead with the questions of, how can I be helpful to you? What's going on in your life? Where are you right now that you feel you could be using a little step up, a little connection, a little introduction? And if so, I might be able to be helpful to you.
All right, so let's play this out. Actually, in real time. I'm making this up on the fly, but I just had this idea and I want to play it out. So, because actually, you and I have met before, so this is not the first time we met. We were introduced by somebody, and I learned about you, and I was like, you got to come on Homo Sapiens, right? So that we already had that in common. But let's just say the year is 2021. It's the late fall, and you and I are at some conference together. And I just kind of saunter up. I'm like, hey, how are you? It's so nice to meet a real person again in a physical space. And we start chatting. How would you then approach the conversation in a way that you can kind of figure out how to do something meaningful to build that meaningful connections?
Sure. Well, if it's fall of 2021, I would imagine we are just on the cusp of returning. Okay. So this might be one of the first few outings, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would probably say to you, Patrick, how was this last year for you? Now, really? And how are you feeling now that it's behind us?
All right, I'm going to answer you. Let's do this. Like, okay. Susan, let me tell you something. This last year was an education. I think I learned, number one, that as an extrovert, I need to be among people. But I also learned that as somebody who has FOMO, that actually having to focus and be at home has been actually a great education. And I become a much more productive person.
Is there anything you wish you had done more of over the year that you?
Yeah, there definitely is. I think the things that I missed out on over the year were meeting people who could be great guests on my podcast. That was harder when I was stuck at home and just, wasn't able to go out into the world and meet people in real time.
Well, you know what? I happen to run a consulting firm that does social impact, and we have some of the coolest clients known to mankind. And I bet you I might be able to introduce you to some folks who might be good guests. And not only that, might be able to draw even higher listening numbers to your podcast. I'm being silly, but
I know,
you see my
and then I
point.
say, okay, I'm going to pay for this round because you just helped me, and it's true. Like that actually, I mean, I didn't think you were going to go there, but that's actually a pretty good point. Let's imagine that we did that conversation again. What might I have done? Like, say I had answered that differently. Could I have answered those questions in a way where it was impossible for you to help me?
Of course. I mean, nothing's perfect,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I am sure I am that obnoxious person that continues to ask questions, because that is where I'm most comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, then the onus isn't on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm digressing, but I think one of the things is we are woefully bad at listening. Okay, I was very careful to listen to what you were saying, and if we were in a crowded room, that might have been a little bit more challenging than on this conversation. But I think what I think we did was totally natural and normal, and I think the if you notice, my response immediately was to go to where I could be helpful. And the most important thing, though, would be then tomorrow actually following through, or the next week. It doesn't have to be the next day. I just personally, I find with everything going on that sometimes it's easiest to do right away, or at least make a note to yourself. And the other thing I recommend, not that you asked for it, if I said I could do something and then I can't do it, don't ghost people. Literally come back and say, you know what, Patrick, I can't do that right now. I kind of was I exaggerated a bit. We don't have a whole bunch of interesting clients right now, but when we do, I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to offer them up.
Yeah, the etiquette of this is so important. You've just made
Yeah.
a good example of how ghosting is inappropriate. And one of the things that I notice is I'm always introducing people to other people, and I'm sure you are too. And I tell people,
It's fun.
yeah,
It's
right, and I'm
fun.
happy to do it. But then, so they say, can you introduce me to XYZ? And I say, sure, just send me an email that I can forward, make it
Yeah.
easy for me,
Right.
right? And then they respond to that email and say, okay, and they write their little blurb. And then I always respond back to them and I say, please send a fresh email. Like it's like little things. So let's talk a little about I'm thinking my pet peeves here. Let's think a little bit about the etiquette of when you are in a networking situation, when you're building a relationship with somebody, when you're asking for favors or helping with other people. What are some of the basic things that we should do or not do to make life easier for the other person?
Sure. I think that's well, first of all, erase the statement, can I pick your brain? That just
Okay, tell me, why is
erase
that?
that.
Unpack that for me.
But I will say, you can still pick people's brain,
Mm-hmm.
okay? I mean, there's 1,000 ways to say it without saying it that way, okay? But I think it again, it goes back to lead with how you can be helpful first.
Mm-hmm.
If you can be helpful to people, they will let you pick their brain. If you show them right up front, very truthfully and honestly, that you are there, it is a reciprocity relationship, then you know what? My brain is for the picking. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, I mean, yes, I'm not, what is it? Manners, Miss Manners. I mean, that isn't, I think I've learned, I'm 56 years old and I've learned a lot in my 56 years. Um, I've learned to actually say my age. I mean, that's a big deal. But I do think, it's being human. It's being kind. It's leading with kindness, and leading with how do you want people to treat you should be how you want. And common sense. I mean, your point about, yes, responding back and not in a fresh email. It happens all the time. And I think it's not because people aren't, I don't want to say they're not stupid. I think people are just so busy they don't stop to think. So I think to put your connector hat on, if you want to be easy to be connected to, do the things that make it easy to be connected to. Be kind, be thoughtful, be considerate, be inquisitive, and listen.
I also think it's kind of the basic idea of a lot of times when we're doing connections with people, they're people that we have a friendly relationship with, that we want to be friends with. And so we start to move the communication into the friend zone. and out
Yep.
of the business zone. And so as you,
Yep.
and by the way, FOMO Sapiens, if you want me to introduce you to somebody, I'm happy to do it, but send a fresh email. And remember that until, we're hanging out and we're old friends, this is a business relationship. It's a cordial one and we're getting to know each other, but it's better to approach it from a business perspective. That way you're maybe a little bit more formal, but there's no typos, it's formatted and all the things that make you come across as much more credible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Susan,
Mm-hmm.
as we're talking, you made it clear the value of offering to help, right? And I think anybody who's on the receiving end of that is very thankful. Now, I want to tell you, I talk to a lot of people who are connectors, and this is the thing they always tell me. Patrick, I make so many connections. I'm always introducing people. And you know what? I feel like I don't get anything back. I feel like I never monetize that. Like I'm putting out all this energy, but it's like I'm spending my life solving other people's problems and getting nothing in return, which I think, and by the way, I totally know what that feels like. And so how do we get into a space where we're actively helping other people, but yet we're creating the conditions where that can come back to us?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you through my own life experience.
Sure.
My business now is 8 years old. And I should say our business because I have a remarkable team of employees, which you have had the pleasure to interact with a couple of them. And 8 years in, 98% of the business has been inbound. I think your listeners can understand how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was from years of thinking, if not thinking, oh, what am I getting from introducing these people? And I can tell you the meetings that I took, the introductions that I made at age 25, at age 35, the thought of at age 48 that I was going to be founding a business and being an entrepreneur could not have been further from the ethosphere of my brain. So there was no kind of intentional, like, I'm doing this. What's going to, how am I going to be rewarded for it? It has rewarded and it continues to reward. So I would say, yes, sometimes it can be thankless and sometimes it feels like you're only, but I can 100% guarantee with what I can see on paper that that old adage, what goes around comes around, is true. There will be times, of course, that people are going to take and not give back. But overall, it will work in your favor.
Now, do you ever sit back and try to actually analyze? I mean, this would be quite an undertaking for somebody who knows as many people as you, but almost sit back and think, well, like, here's all the people I've helped in my life or in the last year, and here's all the people who helped me. And is there an overlap? Do you have any sense for that? Because what I found over the years is that it's interesting. Like you have certain people in your life who you're constantly giving to and they give you nothing back. And then you have a lot of other people in your life who you gave a little something and they go way out of the way to help you out. And it's kind of weird. It's like this asymmetric response, right? Have you seen similar things or how do you think about that?
Well, actually, through the research in the book,
Mm-hmm.
I learned that actually people you would never even met are actually helping you. So sometimes when you help somebody, you may think that person isn't helping, but a connection of that person actually is indirectly helping you. Okay. And I know it's hard to get our brains around that, but the thing is they could have told someone in passing that you were helpful. And then that person who's never met you, Patrick, but actually then, heard your name and then tuned into your podcast and added to your listening audience. Okay. I'm just making this up on the fly, but I mean, that's a perfect example. And in your earlier question, no, I've actually never sat down because I think it's just too like grandiose of an experiment. But I will say the exercise of writing the book and going back into my, ancient brain and going back into early stories of my professional life, it did start to crystallize just how many people have been helpful over the years. People that I had forgotten about, people that in some way, through the magics of technology have reappeared. So I think it definitely, and for those of your listeners who read the book, they'll see there are lots of human stories. There's interviews with 30 or so characters who actually share how they have made connecting. And had I known you before, you would have been in the book.
Want to be in the next one.
You bet. Although I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
Now, I'm wondering, did you think about how this differs across cultures or across generations, because, you know, as somebody, as many of my listeners know, I've worked all over the world, and in some places, being really forthcoming with people and saying like, "How can I help you?" would you know, it's like, "Whoa, who the heck do you think you are? You know, you don't even know me." How do you think this changes as you move into different cultural contexts?
Well, the first section of the book is called Gather,
Mm-hmm.
and there's many facets to Gather, but one of the most important thing is do the self audit of where you are in your life, physically, generationally, what you want to happen over the next 3 or 4 years, what you want to have happen over the next 3 months, and what is the community that you want to create around you.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, much of that will be grounded in where you are in the world or where you plan on going. And I am a big believer in reading the room, you know, in a very hypothetical sense. So, you know, if you are in a culture where it is inappropriate to be inquisitive, asking a lot of questions, then don't do it. Right. I mean, I don't want to put anyone in an uncomfortable situation. In terms of generational, you know, another part of the gather, and this has something to do with generation, is to figure out what your secret sauce is. What is your chief differentiating factor? What makes you special? And oftentimes that is the othering of us that makes us special. And when you're young, sometimes you don't want to even have to talk about that, right? Because you want to be like everyone else. But that is the time to actually, even more so, embrace your special secret sauce. And I've talked to a lot of young folks who are like, "Well, wait, I'm 22. What the heck could I ever offer up, as in, you know, how can I help, to somebody who's in their 50s?" And I my first word is TikTok.
True. It's true.
Right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, believe, I mean, reading Google Maps in a more efficient way, figuring out how to use Squadcast more efficiently. I mean, there's a zillion things, but it takes doing that self-reflection.
Yeah, you need to have those people in your life, and this is something
Yes.
I've learned. It's like I have a good friend who's like in, you know, kind of like 30, who knows how to use all the Sonos and all, has
Yeah.
like, you know, all the tech. And then I've got, you know, other people in my life who are much older than me and have all kinds of like life experience on, you know, some complex, you know, like really crazy stuff. And you can go to them. And so having people around you and
Yes.
that are your squad that have these differentiated skill sets and that you can contribute back into, where it's not, and then it's not about giving and taking and asking, and it's just
No.
about like people knowing where to go for help and then offering it freely because they know that this is sort of a reciprocal relationship. That's like the place you want to get to, right?
That is exactly what this gather ask do is all about. And it's not something you do once, and it's not something that is like linear, like I'm going to do the gather today and the ask tomorrow. It's a livelihood, basically.
What do you do? I had this really funny, awkward moment recently where I had a call with somebody, really impressive person that I was introduced to. It was one of these, like, we didn't really have an agenda. We were just kind of chit chatting a little bit. And then at the end of the call, he says to me, "How can I help you?" And I was sort of like, I don't know, like, buy all my books,
No.
right? Like, I don't know, like, you know, give me 5 stars for the podcast. But it really was, my answer to him, which probably was not, I don't know if it was a good answer or a bad answer. I said, "Listen, nothing right now, but if anything changes, I'll come back to you." Do you think, I mean, did I blow it there, or how would you think about it? Is there a good response that one should have? Because I feel like if one's meeting somebody like you, who is really great helper, and then, you know, when we're offered help, we kind of freak out a little bit, was what I did,
Mhm, mhm,
then we're
mhm.
wasting an opportunity. So what's your advice to me for that one?
You didn't waste an opportunity. You would waste an opportunity if you didn't follow up
Okay.
and ask again. And quite frankly, I think it is, in my book, it's better to be actually thoughtful and give it some thought rather than just thinking on, you know, something off the top of your head that might actually not be something you really need.
Yeah,
Okay?
like I could use I could use a hug right
Yeah,
now. Just give me a hug.
yeah.
That would be weird.
Well, but you know what? If you'd said that, that would have actually been lovely.
Not in a
And
pandemic.
yeah, no, that very true, but a virtual hug is
Yeah.
totally doable, but I think you have now, the door is open, right? Like, that person actually gives you a tremendous opportunity to then respond, and actually you're helping him because you are responding, and you heard him, right? There's an acknowledgement, and the importance of showing people you've seen them, you've heard them.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And you know, one of the things that I like to do, even if I'm not offering like a specific help, is I love to recommend books or articles to people, kind of like your parents did.
Yeah.
That's one thing I think we all can do is just, when you meet somebody, if you start to chat with them and maybe you're like, I don't know, it could be that you met somebody that you think, wow, what could I ever do for this person? I don't even know TikTok. But if there's something you've read or seen that you think is insightful and you share it with
Oh my
them,
God.
it's such a low friction give, but it can really make a difference.
Even just when you follow up, mentioning something you actually talked about during your conversation to relay the fact that you listened to the person is a massive step in the right direction.
I love it. All right, let's move on to the topic that you are an expert in. Besides this, you're an expert in a lot of things, but you run a communications firm, public relations. It's really at the intersection of businesses that are, doing business, but also have social impact. And many of the people listening to the show right now, I know that they are dealing with the challenge of getting the word out there, telling the story about what they do if they're an entrepreneur or working in a company. And this is what you do all day long. And if you have never worked in PR, and thankfully I've had some experiences now to build some knowledge, and it's like, it is one of these things that once you sort of see the matrix, it becomes clearer. But when you're on the outside, it just seems very confusing. So say one of our listeners is looking to hire somebody to help them, a PR firm or internal. What are the kinds of things that they should look for, and what's realistic to expect? I mean, it's like people think they're going to be a New York Times cover tomorrow. That is probably not realistic. So what's a realistic success in this kind of campaign?
Well, first of all, I need to just kind of gently correct the record in that, yes, we use PR,
Yeah.
but we help organizations communicate their impact. So there are multitudes of beautifully brilliant public relations firms that will help you get press. Where we will help you get press is if you are authentically, honestly doing social impact work. Okay. Whether that is bettering the environment, whether that is funding causes, whether that's investing in people of color who are building businesses, that is the kind of impact work. So I just wanted to make sure. But I would tell your listeners who are looking to get, what a quote unquote press, that the first and most important thing is don't talk about it until you've done it. Have a story. Have something that is already that is it has been done, rather than something you're hoping to do, right? Because for you always are going to want proof in the pudding. You're going to want other people, customers, clients, grantees to be the ones telling your story, and that can only be happening if you've actually made stuff happen. Okay, so that is before even engaging. I do highly recommend, however, whether that you hire internally or use external resources, that being very intentional about your communications is an absolute must have in the world we're living in. Okay. It's right up there with, having a good CFO and a good lawyer. And when I was growing up, a good plumber. But to me, that is vitally important. But really have that story down. What is it that you are offering? What different? And of course, in my world, what difference are you making in the world?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we see these things and we're like, oh, look at them, they're in the paper. Lucky. No, it is communication strategy work. It's figuring out a story. It's knowing the right people. It's crafting it. It is tons of hard work. There are few accidents in the world. Few people just go viral. It is a layered strategy. And once you realize that, first of all, then you're like, oh man, this is going to be tiring, but then you can try to do it. So that's really good advice. The book is The Lost Art of Connecting, the Gather, Ask, Do method for building meaningful business relationships. The website is thelostartofconnecting.com. And the author is Susan McPherson. Susan, thanks so much for being here.
Patrick, this was just such a joy. Truly grateful. Thank you.
FOMO. Big news. We now have a brand new website. So head over to FOMOsapiens.com where you can listen to past episodes, learn more about the show, and find out how to advertise. Also, head over to Spotify where you can find and follow playlists of the best of the show. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you, so don't be shy. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com. FOMO.